he was doing that rebel against the conservative Christian thing, which
yeah, it's a little bit. Oops, it's a little ridiculous. It's like, come on.
It's tempting once you like really critically self-examine the metaphysics of what they're proposing, and then you look at the evidence on Wikipedia for carbon dating, and you're like, you don't check the sources.
And you check the sources, like,
and then you watch a Richard Dawkins documentary, and you're like, these motherfuckers are full of shit.
Yeah, Dawkins does not do a good job. He's just like, I'm going to make a point, and if you don't believe in my point, you're a nasty bastard.
He did make a good point about like how Christians are atheists except for one God. Like, because there's all the different diversity of religions that believe in different forms of God. And so, like, being a Christian would be an atheist in terms of a Hindu, an atheist in terms of, the Islamic God, Allah. And you don't believe in Allah, so you're an atheist towards Allah, but you're a Christian.
Well, C.S. Lewis...
And that speaks to the cultural relativism of the thing.
Well, he spoke to how he thought a lot of atheists... There is such a thing as an honest atheist. He just doesn't see it, and they're really not militant. That's the difference. Because you have these folks who just don't see it, and they don't believe. I don't see it. I'm not going to believe in something I don't see. And they're not out there trying to destroy this belief system of the masses or what have you. And you got your folks out there who are just trying to totally dismantle it. And there's a big difference there, because the one's got a chip on his shoulder, and the other doesn't. And that's the difference in the Christian perspective. It's not a chip on his shoulder. It's I've found the reality. I want to share it. And now, if I share it, I'm an evil person, apparently.
Well, I think the metaphysical criticisms are valid.
Which ones?
I think, but we'll get to that in a second. But I think if you're going to make such a big deal and make your whole career out of the metaphysical criticisms, like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens, if you're going to do that, you need to have a moral system that backs you up.
Yeah.
Because there's that vacuum of a moral system that's happening in this country now, where everything is relative. Do what you want, do what thou wilt. It goes back to Aleister Crowley.
Straight up Satanism.
and so there becomes a justification for everything based on culture, based on experiences, whatever.
Yeah. And that doesn't work. That ain't right.
And so there's a certain responsibility that comes with critiquing the metaphysical suppositions that underlie Christianity.
So how do you balance that? Yeah.
And so you have to have something to back it up, because it's so wrapped up in morals and how people act in the world that there's a responsibility with that they haven't fulfilled, that Dawkins hasn't fulfilled, but Stephen Molyneux,
he does a good
job.
It's
a different thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Stephen Molyneux has a whole secular system of ethics that he proposes in a universally preferable behavior, a book that he wrote. Is magnificent. I think it's the most philosophically significant book. I think he does a good job, yeah. And it's unarguable. It's unarguable. Like, so many people have gone on his call-in show and tried to critique that book. It's just like...
Well, my only argument would be you can't have universality without a creator. I don't think without exact design you can have anything of a universally preferable nature.
I think you can say it's universally wrong to kill people.
Not without God. Survival of the fittest.
Why is that wrapped up in God?
Well, survival of the fittest says the strongest survive, which is to say that to evolve and remain dominant as a species, you have to be dominant over other, perhaps, upstarts within your genetic line.
But we have consciousness, so we don't have the strictly animal goals evolutionarily. We have also conceptual goals that we strive to be good people. We strive to be Christ-like.
Why? That's the question. Why do we have it?
Because it's the most beneficial thing for society. To not have a violent society that thrives on...
Why is there only the one? Why? Because we've been here about the same length as a lot of these other animals. Suddenly one realizes there's a conscious benefit to caring for your weak in society. It doesn't make sense from survival of the fittest standpoint. It's like all of a sudden we didn't have that, then bam.
No, when you introduce capitalism, it makes sense. Because then you want people to thrive around you, because then you can step into that system and thrive yourself.
Right, but that doesn't seem to be something possible without a God. That's my point, is without
a moral system, yes. A metaphysical God? That's another story.
You can't get a moral system without a metaphysical God.
No, you can universalize human behavior. And you can look at your own behavior and universalize it.
That goes back to my point, universality. I don't think you can have universality, objectivity.
You can imagine conceptually if everyone was doing what you're doing. You can imagine that conceptually, and that's the universalization of your own behavior. So it can't be universally preferable to steal from people, because if stealing is universally preferable, then if I steal something from you, I can't be mad if you steal it back.
But here's my point.
I can't be mad if somebody else steals from me.
I wouldn't have that moral compass without that being put into me in a way that's not evolutionary.
What if I just explained it? What if I was your dad and I just explained it to you like that? How would you not be able to understand that without a metaphysical God?
I'd probably sit there and try and justify myself, according to what you said.
You don't have.
However, the idea that we can inbuilt in us all have the same universal thing objectively would indicate there's an absolute truth, right?
No, I'm saying that there's something that can be communicated to people that is an absolute truth.
My point is
it's not inherent.
Is there absolute truth?
Yes.
Okay, I agree. There's absolute truth. I don't think you can have absolute truth in a universe that exists without specific design. Because if you've got a universe that arises from nothing for no reason via the Big Bang,
it's
then
just
that which is absolute is just that which is the strength, whatever's the strongest.
The Big Bang is a placeholder for a question mark. We don't know how the fucking thing happened.
And the point is, if you've got no design, if there are no if there isn't something that has given that purpose, then where does purpose come from?
Human beings create their own meaning.
Human beings create their own meaning. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that sounds
based on the experience of other human beings, and you recognize the universality is inherent in experience.
That sounds like something separate from evolution.
No, it's separate from evolution in the fact that we have a consciousness that's self-reflective, and that's the only reason we have morality.
That consciousness doesn't.
But it's a question mark. It's not God. It's a question mark.
Consciousness.
We don't know where consciousness came from.
The fact that we can differentiate between right and wrong, I think, is that conscious level that differentiates us from the animals.
It's just the human neocortex that allows us to observe our subconscious behaviors that were previously evolved in lower hominids.
See, the evolution
we can turn the mirror around and look at what we're doing and say, is that something that if everybody was doing what I was doing, how would society end up? And we can think in the future, and we can conceptualize and build those scaffolding to realize there's a certain way you can act in society that's beneficial for everybody.
Now, see, here's the thing. We can do that as human beings. We're a separate order from the animals. But according to the deep time evolutionary model, where we haven't been designed, there are animals that exist with us today which are older than us and haven't developed this consciousness. The nature of consciousness, even in an evolutionary model, is a statistical outlier to the rest of that which exists around us. So the objectivity is not immediately apparent. It's something that even if you take out the God equation, it's an outlier that goes against the norm of what's physically observable.
Well, we're definitely an outlier, but the mainstream science answer to that, I guess, would be that climatological pressures put excess pressure on specifically lower hominids that were tree-dwelling apes that suddenly didn't have as much rainforest, didn't have as much moisture, didn't have as much plant life to live up in the trees and survive, didn't have as much fruit life to provide sustenance for their diets, so they had to experiment with new diets. as the climate was getting
that
more arid.
Narratively feasible, but there's other animals that have existed longer than mankind in arid, cold, hot, all over the world.
Right, but with apes, you have a certain predilection for that kind of social, communicative type of thing.
But we still have apes. I mean, so why haven't they gone and done that? They've been experiencing the same thing we have, and they're in the record around the same time. Why didn't they get the consciousness when we did?
Because it wasn't apes that became human. It was a middle species that...
I know, I'm saying you had the apes that became man over time, 3 million years or so from the time you had that evolutionary mutation in the genome that led to man. And then you had the apes that were around but didn't. They just stayed apes while man were becoming man. Why are these apes over here staying apes even though these ones are becoming conscious and shit?
You notice how there's no apes in North America.
There's Bigfoot. There's the Bigfoot running around.
There's no apes in Siberia. There's no apes in modern day Europe.
In Japan, there's a snow ape. In Japan, there's a snow ape.
I'm saying
there's an ape that exists above the frost line.
I'm saying the jungle atmosphere has a certain carrying capacity when it gets to a certain
I know, but
level.
there's a snow ape in Japan. There's apes that don't live in just the jungle atmosphere. For the most part, they do. But okay, there's only one kind of but it's not conscious. There, it hasn't developed into a human being. There's polar bears, which are a specific type of bear. Most bears are in the jungle. See, genetic mutations, by and large, aren't positive. In fact, I don't think there are any positive mutations that we've observed. They're only theorized. Like, for example, there's some black tribes that get anemic, and it helps them survive from malaria, right? So that's called a positive mutation.
You can look at skin color.
But that's like saying being born without a hand makes you predisposed to be a better thief because you can slip out of handcuffs. That doesn't make any... That's a disability.
Skin color. Black people have a genetic adaptation that allows them to be exposed to much more sunlight.
But they still get sunburned. Yes, they do.
Compared to white people, it's not even comparable.
Okay, I'd say probably white people get sunburned more than black people. I agree with that. However, that adaptation of skin color is not the same as a switch in kinds.
Why would God just arbitrarily decide that, we're going to have these races?
I think God built kinds with a lot of adaptation in them. I've made this argument before. You got a car, it's got a heater, it's got a cooler. You go into the Yukon of Alaska or Canada or whatever, you're going to use the heater because it's cold. You go into the Caribbean, you drive to California, you drive to Florida, you're going to use the AC because it's hot and you want to cool down. Now, those features exist in the car, but they didn't evolve because you went north or south. They already existed in the design of the vehicle. I think things like skin color, things like our hair, and even eyes and stuff, a lot of that's adaptable. For example, a white person will tan if they're in the sun long enough and their skin has time to adapt itself to it. Now, that person hasn't evolved into a new organism since their skin's tan. They're the same old person. That adaptation is built in. So that built-in adaptation over generations can result in darker skin, but it's not going to lead to something that's not human. It's not going to lead to some post-human creature with obsidian skin that can reflect the sun and live without water in temperatures exceeding 200 degrees.
I just think we're looking at such a microscopic slice of time where we're alive, and we're like, well, we can't directly observe the adaptation of genetics, and so... We're looking at that, but over time, it's like it's unobservable with our current instruments.
I'd say this is where faith comes in on either side, because before the evolutionary theory, in some scientific circles, it was called the God of the gaps, because God did it. Well, now with evolutionary theory, it's time is the God of the gaps. Great long periods of time did it, because you can't observe an organism switching kinds. You can observe adaptation within a kind. You can observe Chihuahuas and Great Danes, but they're still a canine.
See, I don't buy into the mainstream evolutionary narrative as a religion. I will look at any evidence presented to me, and if there's a solid argument behind it, and if it's reasonable, and if it's measurable through the instruments that we have, our scientific instruments,
I gotta get you watching some of these
then I'll believe
tapes.
it. But that provides much more evidence to me than anything written in a text of faith.
Before we go any further, I don't believe in flat earth. Flat earth is nonsense. Just so you know. That's nonsense.
God's a better designer than that.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't believe in that. I think that's a measure to
balls.
discredit.
That's what we're saying. He made it a ball.
I think it's a measure to discredit some of the arguments I make from a creationist standpoint and make people who believe in literal creation of the universe seem as though they're some backwoods flat earth idiot. I don't believe in that, and when I can see the measurements, when I can see the data, I will go that way. The problem is you don't have this data for evolution. Like, I have this bottle cap which weighs half an ounce or whatever, and I know that given its surface area and the force of gravity where we're at in LA near the sea at, at sea level, it's going to fall this fast. I can also note that gravity and time work a little bit different in the mountains. It turns out time is not quite as fast because gravitational pull is different. If I had exact enough instruments, I could probably note a difference, but I know where it's going to be. I can make those measurements. I can do the same on the moon. I can say a sixth of Earth's gravity is different than here on Earth. I can do all those measurements, and I can plot the force of gravity. I can't do that with evolution. I can't take an organism and say this organism is going to evolve at this rate over this amount of time. They're going to change into this creature. I can't do that. And the evolutionary thinkers say that's because that's not how evolution works. It takes mutations that may be positive, which accidentally just kind of stumble that direction. Doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense because the mutations we observe, they don't lead to something positive.
Because, I would argue, the mutations we observe happen in our consciousness. That's what's happening right now, is an evolution of consciousness. That's what Bill Hicks was talking about. That's what modern human beings have done, because we've stopped evolving biologically because there's not a climatological necessity for it. We are evolving ideas into finding what the truth is, because that's our imperative. That's our spearhead as conscious beings. We're evolving ideas into the sharpest tools that we can make them. But previous to us, there was a lot of biological shit that was happening that I feel like there's a body of evidence for that there's not for Scripture. Oh
man, they found Nineveh. They found Sodom and Gomorrah. They have found these archaeological sites. They found the place where the Israelites crossed the sea that God split.
Not that the biblical narrative doesn't hint at truths that actually happen and hint at moral truths that are conceptually true.
Right.
That's correct. That's right on point. And that's why I think people like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris that just dismiss it on its face, they're being short-sighted.
And I wouldn't dismiss some of the scientific discoveries that have come through misguided, in my perspective, evolutionary examination, because there are changes within a kind that are notable and worth observing and can show how a creature in a certain environment will adapt to a degree so that it can live in that environment better than if it didn't change and remained as it were. And I think there's a lot of validity to that science. My argument just comes from looking at adaptations within a kind and positing that mankind came from single-celled organisms that evolved into fish, into lizards, into mammals, into man. That's where my difficulty comes. Because I think observably...
So do you think there's life on other planets?
That's a difficult question.
I knew it would be.
I know what happened at Roswell.